white's just crushing black, and so I was enjoying the game. Okay, well, let's get into Lajos Portisch. Well, who was Lajos Portisch? Well, Lajos Portisch was born in April 1937 in Hungary. Right, he was born in April 1937 in Hungary. And I'll show you a photograph of him in case you don't know what he looks like. That's how you spell his name. And just go into Google Images. There he is, the great Lajos Portisch. And when I saw him, there's different photographs of Lajos there on Google Images. But when I saw Lajos Portisch, he actually looked a bit like this, right? Like the photo there on the right, that one there. So that was the Lajos Portisch that I remember when I was young. And he came to Australia and he was doing a tour, a chess tour. And he was, at that time, he was revered by all the chess players in Sydney as one of the greatest grandmasters to ever come to our shores. This is him today, this photograph here. You can see there he is. But that's just from Google Images. The great Grandmaster Lajos Portisch. Right, okay. So I'm just going to go back. I'm going to go back here to chess.com. Right, back to chess.com. And you should be able to see, yeah, you've got your board all mixed up now, John. Real brilliant. I'm just going to adjust the board size so you can see it all. There you go. It's not the best board, but it's the best I can give you for the moment. That's pretty good. So just click on there, get that to go away. And here we go. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to tell you a few things about him. I'm going to look at two games that are played by Lajos Portisch. And let's see now. He played in between 1962 to 1993. This super grandmaster. He was a super grandmaster, right, from Hungary, and he played 12 interzonals and qualified for the candidates 8 times. Right, qualified for the World Chess Championship 8 times. So this is no slouch. He was so consistent. That was between 1965 and 1988. In the mid-90s, Bobby Fischer spent a lot of time in Hungary. The great Bobby Fischer, probably the greatest player that's ever lived. And he would visit Portisch's home, right? And he loved Portisch's wife's cooking, right? So there you go. It's just a small little thing in case if you haven't read it already or heard about it. Yeah, the great Grandmaster Portisch, he loved, Bobby Fischer, he loved Portisch's wife's cooking, you know. And Bobby Fischer once ate a kilo of Hungarian goulash. Well, I love Hungarian goulash. In the early days in Sydney, I'd hang out at the Giza Maroczy. Giza Maroczy was a Hungarian too. And the Giza Maroczy Chess Club, it was called, in George Street, Sydney. And all the Hungarians would get in there. And after the chess, we'd all go up to the coffee lounge and we'd have a goulash, a Hungarian goulash. That's right. Anyway, one thing I remember of that period there, the Hungarians, they used to like to have these bishops with little black tops on them. And I noticed in the photographs there on Google Images of where Lajos Portisch is sitting down playing chess as a man in his 70s or 80s. From that photo, I don't know what age he was when the photo was taken. But yeah, he liked that style of pieces and he loved his chess pieces. He wasn't one that likes computer images and playing with computer images. No, Lajos Portisch would rather analyse chess on his chessboard. He was old school, right? Okay, and nothing wrong with old school. It was a wonderful period, right? And they used to analyse together. Bobby Fischer and Lajos Portisch used to analyse together. He spent some time, Bobby Fischer spent some time in Hungary. And one other thing about GrandMaster Portisch, he loved to sing classical pieces. In actual fact, he would sing operatic arias, right? He was a real multi-talented man, right? He used to like to go swimming and stuff like that. But he loved to sing classical pieces, including Strauss and Beethoven operatic pieces, you see. But there you go. He was 9-time Hungarian champion, right? 9 times he was Hungarian champion. And in 1980, he had a little bit of a success when he stopped Spassky by drawing 7-7 in the Mexico Interzonal. Spassky got him earlier on, but he says, all right, I'm going to dig in tight. And he held Spassky 7-7 in the Mexico Interzonal. Portisch, GrandMaster Portisch, Lajos Portisch, he was also Karpov's second, right, in the 1990 match versus Kasparov, Garry Kasparov. So there you go. So Portisch was still firing away then, and he was the second. So he to beat Natalie Karpov's second, he must have been held in very high respect, very high esteem. All right? Okay. So I've done a little bit of pre-work on this for you, and I've got to go into my library, and it'll probably tell you, you'll probably see this. Yeah, you'll see. Well, first game we're going to play is Portisch-Gligorich from the 1970 Interzonal round 16. Okay. So this is round 16 of the 1970 Interzonal between Lajos Portisch playing the white pieces and Zvetozar Gligorich playing the black pieces. And it's the English opening. So Gligorich plays c5, knight to f3. I think we all know these moves. Knight to f6, knight to c3. So it's like the 4 knights, isn't it, right? 4 knights variation. All the knights are out, and you know it's one of the chess rules for those beginners out there. You put your knights on f3. Right, you put your knights on f3 and you put your knights on c3 when you're developing your pieces. And same for black, right? And also when you develop a knight on c6 or c3, you do it behind the pawns. The pawn has influence in the centre, and both players, both great players I should say, are thinking along the same lines. Zvetozar Gligorich was an absolute dynamo. He was a powerful grandmaster from Yugoslavia, I believe. The old Yugoslavia. D4 is played. Now, as I might have mentioned, Lajos Portisch was a very classical player. So this is like a queen's pawn type line. And he loved these positional. He was very positional in his approach to chess. A lot of openings. He didn't even bother studying. He would study. I'm told he would study 8 hours a day. And Bobby Fischer said, "Well, I study 8 hours a day." And he said, "Yeah, tell me about it." Yeah. So he not only he specialised in his openings. Let me put it that way. He specialised in his openings, and he was also known as the Hungarian Botvinnik. There you go. Yeah, he had a reputation for his style of play. So he was called the Hungarian Botvinnik, right? And this is going back to the old USSR, Soviet Socialist Republic area, a period of time where they ruled the world. And often GrandMaster Lajos Portisch would compete against the Russians and always finish right at the top. So he wasn't like a dynamo like Bobby Fischer that destroyed all the Russians, but he certainly held his own, and he was held in high esteem, as I say, by all the Russian grandmasters. And well, you know that already because he was Karpov's second against Kasparov. I mentioned that. E6 is played. Now, obviously, Zvetozar Gligorich, by playing E6, he's preparing the D5 move. Okay, he's signalling to his opponent, I'd like to play D5. What are you going to do about that? Well, he played G3. He thought, oh, no, I just play my normal position, quiet positional line. I mean, there's all these other things that he could do. He could play knight here with the idea of a check and all that nonsense. And he could take the knight, but that's a bad move. The pawn would just recapture and the pawn would go to D5 and black would have a better game. But a lot of players will play knight here with the idea of the check. But no, he plays G3. He played G3. And just he wants to get his minor piece working, his bishop. Just fianchetto his bishop along the diagonal. Okay, Carlsen style, I suppose. Anyway, here we go. Knight goes back and attacks the bishop, right? And that's a good move because the bishop really hasn't got a square. It can't take the pawn on F2. That won't work. So the bishop hasn't really got a square to go to. So he just pops it in here to B4. Zvetozar Gligorich just pops it in there. And he knows what he's doing. He's a super grandmaster of that period. And he used to have, Zvetozar Gligorich used to have some big battles with Bobby Fischer too. Bobby had usually come out on top, but Zvetozar took quite a few draws off him. D4. D5 is played, so he's able to play the move that he prepared. Pawn takes pawn, and now knight takes pawn. Now here, the knight and the bishop are combining to put pressure on Portisch's C3 square. Now how does he handle this? Well, he plays A3, doesn't he, right? He plays A3. Surely, now, if you play knight takes knight, right? White could actually take the knight with check, take the queen with check, take the bishop. So there's a whole range of options there. So he takes with the bishop with check. Right? The pawn takes. Now he castles. I'll tell you why. He doesn't want to take this pawn because he can see that if he takes that pawn, after the exchange of queens, the bishop can go here, and that pawn here will fall. And when this pawn falls, right, there will be isolated pawns to attack in the endgame, right? So even as early as this position, the grandmasters are looking at a possible endgame in some variations, and so black wants to avoid that and keep his good pawn structure intact. So that's why he castles. Okay. And now he's threatening knight takes pawn. Pawn moves forwards and takes the knight. Notice white hasn't castled, but white has got the benefit of having the two bishops. Right? So white's got the benefit of having the two bishops. White has not castled. Knight moves back and attacks a pawn. Now, he's probably hoping, you'd think, for queen takes queen or something like that. And he takes it. The rook recaptures. Now the pawn hits the knight. So what white's saying is that I'm happy with this position, My pawn is protected by a knight for the moment, but it gives me a little bit of time to get my pieces working. My bishop is good. It targets your queen side, and this bishop wants to come into play, and my rook probably might want to go to b1 too, as putting more pressure down here. But he needs a few moves, so that's why he plays pawn here. Protect the pawn, attack, right? See, it's threatened, so you're protected by attacking, and at the same time, you give yourself a little bit of a time, a little bit of a tempo to be able to, well, he's got a castle and get his pieces working. Because black's got all the activity, and black plays knight c4. It's an intimidating move, but it doesn't seem to do too much. Knight to d2, I'll tell you what it does do. It stops bishop coming out. The bishop can't go there or there, and right, and bishop here, e5 can be played. So Lajos Portisch, the great Lajos Portisch, decides that no, I'll play knight here. I want to get my bishop working, but on my terms, on his terms. You see. Now look at this move. Now this is what you're faced with. You make a move. You make a move going backwards, right? So you move your knight backwards. Then you're faced with the knight coming in here. Okay. Now you can't take the knight. You say, oh, Zvetozar Gligorich, if he was FIDE Master John Curtis, he'd be saying, oh no, my knight. But you can't take the knight. If you take the knight, it's going to be checkmate, right? Knight takes, check, king here, and rook checkmates. Right? So what do you do? Right? Well, white plays rook here, right? A little rook left and protects the knight, and at the same time stops the check. Okay, so it's a handy little move, isn't it? So this is very, very fine defence. It's only very fine. It's just holding together. Bishop to b2. Okay. Now the knight check doesn't do too much because if you check, the knight's almost trapped after king here. We can't find a square for it. So what do? Well, you move the other knight back and protect it, don't you? But the point is that when the knights are protecting each other like this, often they're interfering with their own mobility, the mobility, right? So, by the way, if anyone just came in, we're looking at the great Lajos Portisch from versus Zvetozar Gligorich, right? And this game was played in a Interzonal, I believe, or no, Palma de Mallorca. Was this a Palma de Mallorca game? Or yeah, this was Palma de Mallorca, I believe. This one was played, and in that tournament, he got fantastic result. E3 is played. Knight to f5, right? And now this knight is sort of out of play a bit, isn't it? It hasn't got much maneuverability. Okay, remember how I said those knights are interfering with each other? But it didn't have many really good squares. He prefers this square to that square and going back here because he won't be able to get out anywhere, right? So that's what he's thinking. So he's going here. Maybe he can go here and come back in here later. So he's trying to work out, maximise his options as to what he can do with his knight. King to e2 is played. Now, a lot of players, beginners, and they would just castle, right? But that's effectively, because there's no checkmates there or anything, that's almost like castling, isn't it? Very, very fast. And you've got the king near the middle of the board for an endgame, right? If the castles come off or one castle comes off, a king can be a very dynamic piece moving in the endgame, supporting a pawn structure. Hence, he plays king e2. Bishop d7, he says, oh, he says, you put your king on e2, maybe I can get a check along the diagonal there, okay? All right then. So bishop goes to c3. That stops the knight going here to enable the check, right? Isn't it interesting how he's just one move ahead, but at the same time, we've only got 6 pawns versus 6. Remember, the advantage that white has is spatial advantage. This pawn is giving him spatial advantage, and he's got 2 bishops. Is it enough to win? Well, let's see. Plays rook on the a file to c8. He's hoping that he can put some pressure on the pawn, inevitably. Rook to b1 is played. Now we have direct pressure against the b pawn. And he plays rook c7 and he holds the b pawn. But everything's only just being held. It's a very powerful position. The rooks are doubled. See how many rooks are doubled? So this rook lift that was played earlier to defend this square has come in very handy for the... this is what we would describe as a middle endgame. Middle endgame, because it's part of the... It's the middle of the game, isn't it, really? There's still lots of pieces on the board, but it's also an endgame. And a very complex one, too. White's doing a little bit better because the rooks have got plenty of scope. See how these rooks are sort of jammed in a little bit? All signs that White's got a spatial initiative. And of course with the 2 raking bishops as well. Well, bishop c8's played, and Zvetozar Gligorich probably thought that this stage now he'd solved his problem with the threat on the b pawn by playing bishop c8. Knight c4. Now here we go. This knight, in some variations, might want to go here, and you wouldn't be able to take it because bishop takes would attack 2 castles. So the knight might want to go here and put more pressure on that pawn. So what do? He says, well, before you put pressure on my pawn, I might as well give it to you, right? And so he's looked at Zvetozar Gligorich has decided, oh, you're going to win that pawn anyway. Well, my rook is in there, sort of attacking these two bishops. Sorry, these 2 pieces, the knight and the bishop. So he's thinking, oh, maybe I'll get a discovered attack along there. So if I'm going to lose the pawn, I'll lose it on my terms. Pawn takes pawn, pawn takes, and now knight takes pawn. Now, if the knight stays here, and you play rook takes pawn, there'd be a nasty pin along here, right? So that's why he takes with the knight. Okay? So, okay, righty. So he gives him a check, and he says, hey, gotcha, I've got a check. Anyway, Lajos Portisch decides, oh, he says, you got nothing. I'm just going to slip the king back to e1, which is a handy square. And there's no more attack, right? I've got full control of the open board. I've got my raking bishops. All I've got to do is just maneuver my knight somewhere to a good square. And I'll be having a really good game, thank you very much. And I can also play a4 and a5 and link up with my knight. Because I've got a pass pawn. Oh, he does it. He wants to push the pawn. f6 is played. Black wants to nullify this bishop along here, right? Sick and tired of the 2 bishops. He thinks, well, I'll try to bury a bishop. Not on your Nelly, says the great Lajos Portisch. Knight to d5. Now he's laying it into him. He says, right, I'm attacking your knight, I'm attacking the bishop and the pawn. Are you going to take my knight off? Well, no. White's happy to just control all these squares, which are basically all knight hopping squares. You see all those knight moves? They're all blocked by one bishop. So he's stopping all those knights hippity-hoppeting all around the place. The king comes up to f7. Now he takes the knight, but he captures the knight, but he captures the knight on his terms. Really important. Pawn takes knight. Rook b6. Really important move again, because when the rook moves forwards to attack the knight, if the bishop moves, say here, then you can always change a castle off. Whilst there are two castles on the board for each player, it's very, very difficult to win the game. Often if you exchange down just to two castles, the game is very drawish between top level players. Bishop c4 is played. And you can see now Black was hoping that he would be able to set up a blockade against that A pawn and get a draw, but he's having some trouble with his isolated D pawn here. Rook goes to c1. White's just simply threatening. Rook takes bishop, and capturing a knight wins a knight. Knight goes back to e7, so there was real pressure there. Okay. The pawn proceeds forwards. If you're going to pass pawn, push it. Unless, of course, there's a better move. Okay, so he stops it. He blockades the pawn. He says that pawn's not going anywhere. And now the bishop goes back. He says, well, I'm going to eliminate. I'm very happy with my bishops, but I'm going to eliminate your white bishop, which I think is too strong. It's doing a good job, and it's better than my bishop, so I want to take it off. And Black hasn't got much choice. He captures. King takes. And now the knight goes to f4. Knight goes to f4. And one would think that in this position, if the knight could come to d6 and go there, wow, what a great game for Black. If the knight could just come back here and pop in there. Right? It does look good, doesn't it? Well, he played rook there. That's the end of that idea. You can't do that now because he'll take your pawn off, won't he? Okay. So the white's got spatial advantage. There's two open files on the board, and white's got both of them, right? Open files being where there are no pawns on the file. There's no pawns on those files. So they're the only two files where there is no pawns. So white's got full control of both open files. Plays rook e8. Simple threat, knight takes pawn. He says, I'll be happy to take that pawn off. And I think I can draw. King moves up, right? That active king that we spoke about earlier. The king moves up and protects the pawn. The rook goes over there, right? Now, in this position here, could you have played knight there? No, you can't. Oh, it's not protected. So rook to d7's played. I think he wants to play knight here with the idea of knight checks. King to f3. So, the king is playing an active role now in the structure. And now the rook's double up with the knight. He wants to take that pawn. He's happy to exchange. But white says no. He says no. You can't do that. It's not allowed. Now, you think, oh, pawn here looks good. And if pawn takes pawn, knight takes check, but you can see the rook takes knight. So you can't play pawn there because the rook takes knight. So it's a very, very finely balanced game. Rook to d7 is played because the d pawn is on priest. And now the pawn moves forwards. Okay? Now it's getting really dangerous with that passed pawn. Doubles the rooks. He doesn't want that pawn to move forwards. He says, you move that pawn forwards, it's gone. I'll chop it off. Now have a look at White's next move. G'day Buffer LOL, the legendary John Curtis. We're analysing the game. We're actually analysing and talking about the great Grandmaster Lajos Portisch. Okay? And for those people who just came in, Lajos Portisch is one of the super grandmasters of the 60s, 70s and 80s. Okay? He qualified 11 times in 11 Interzonals. He made the candidates tournament for the world title 8 times. 9 times champion of Hungary, known as the Hungarian Botvinnik. That's right. Okay. Rook, and he was an opera singer as well. So I've already told the people in the chat that. Anyway, he played rook here, and it was in this position that Zvetozar Gligorich just got fed up, and he said, I can't play this chess game anymore because this pawn here is going to be promoted. Rook here is going to be played, and frankly, it's going to be the end of the game. You can't go over there straight away because rook takes pawn will attack the knight and make matters even worse. So there's nothing you can do. You're all tied down. Position's all tied up. And White just wants to play rook here and queen his pawn. So that's the plan. And with that, Zvetozar Gligorich, the great Yugoslavian grandmaster, he resigned. There we go. All right, that was game one. Now I've got a very special game for you by Grandmaster Portisch. Just 1 minute. I'm just going to get rid of this stupid thing. All right. Damn messages just keeps coming up. I've got to sign into Twitch all the time, like every blinking second day. It's awful. Anyway, here we go. They just want all the accounts safe and everything. They're trying to do the right thing. Right, so now we're going to look at another game. And I've got a nice surprise here. This game is, I'm not going to tell you anything. I will tell you. I'm going to tell you because I'm going to show you. Right, here we go. I'm going back to my library. You probably saw it when I went in earlier, if you've been with me all along for this presentation, right? Okay, so it's Bobby Fischer versus Portisch. It's actually Portisch versus Bobby Fischer from Sousse 1967. Right, the Sousse tournament in 1967, very famous tournament. And Lajos Portisch plays Robert J. Fischer. Okay. Okay, so, right. Here we go. Oh, analysis board. Now I'm in. Sorry about that. I didn't want to, right, now I'm right. Okay, I didn't want to have too many screens open. Okay, so, whoa, knight to f3. Robert J. Fischer's playing the black pieces against Grandmaster Lajos Portisch, right? Ignore the rating for Fischer. I think Lajos Portisch's high rating was about 2630 or 26, about 2630 at his peak, something like that. 2655, right? There you go. Yeah, he had a peak rating of 2655. And now I think he's currently rated March this year, because he's still playing chess. He loves his chess. He's rated 2,467 in March 2022. Okay? which is pretty good for a guy 84 years of age to be rated nearly 2,500. That's fantastic, isn't it? I'll tell you what, I'd be happy to be rated 2467 today, let alone at 69 rather than 80, whatever he is. 84 years old, I think he is. 84 years young, the great Lajos Portisch. Knight to f6 by Bobby Fischer. It's a symmetrical game. Look at this. They're so cautious of each other, they're playing a symmetrical game. Finches. So all Bobby's doing is he's just replying to whatever Lajos Portisch does, and he thinks, well, you make a mistake, I'll get you, right? And Lajos Portisch had lost a few games to Bobby Fischer, I think. It's d6, d4. Okay, so this is the setup that Carlsen's been playing, right? So Portisch was ahead of his time. He was already playing the Carlsen systems, not castles. Knight c3, a la Carlsen. Knight b file to d7 by the great Bobby Fischer, and castles. Now, I've played this position many times, and I've played for black and white, and e5 is the book move. e4, c6 is played. And we all know and love c6 in this position, don't we, boys and girls? Because this is the way you counterplay in this position. You always hope that at some stage you can take this pawn, and even if you're a weak backward d pawn, you might be able to, after rook e8, a few other moves, put pressure on the e pawn. So white gets the d pawn, you get the e pawn. A little bit of a like swings and, what do you call it? The swings and roundabouts of chess, that's right. h3 is played by Bobby. Oh, no, not by Bobby, by Lajos Portisch. Get it right, John. Right, okay. Queen to b6. I don't like that move, but Bobby Fischer played it. Can't be too bad. I usually play this move, a5 or something like that. I don't know what's best. Rook e1. So he's just overprotecting his e pawn. Rook e8, right? And now in this position, black's got control of the black squares. He's got a good solid control of the black squares, and white's got absolutely dominating the white squares. So let's see what took place. He says, well, that's it. I'm fed up with you. I'm just going to push the pawn down there, and you've got a backward d pawn, and I've got space. And we all know from that game that we saw Lajos Portisch play with space and how effective he was against Gligorich. So he's trying to do the same thing against Bobby Fischer. Just play the position. It's a logical move. Knight c5 is played. Now in this position, there's a book trap, I believe. Right? You think, oh, hold on a minute, I'll take that pawn. Right? Say you take the pawn. Pawn takes pawn. And if the queen takes, well, you've got this lovely square for your knight, haven't you, right? Okay. And if the pawn takes, you think, oh, I want a pawn, yay! But you haven't, unfortunately, because after rook here, after rook there, there's a whole lot of problems. Your queen's sort of trapped, but you can take that pawn. But after you take that pawn, this move would be played, and the game would be over because there'd be a big check here, and the queen's attacked, And even that position here, knight takes pawn could possibly be played too, right? Knight takes pawn, but because it's a discovered attack on the queen. I don't know which move is best, but both of them look pretty nasty. So in that position, d5 and rook to b1 was played. So he didn't take the c-pawn. He understood the position perfectly well, the great Lajos Portisch. And a5 was played by the great Bobby Fischer. Okay, and that's to stop b4. Bobby's saying, you're not going to play b4 against me. I want to be world champion. You can't do that. Pawn here. And we've just stopped you doing that, right? And the whole idea was pawn here was to dislodge the knight, okay? So that prevents it. So bishop to e3 is played by Lajos. And Bobby retreats to c7. Bobby's happy in this position. He's got all the classical types of bits and pieces of the game. He's got control there, and he's got options like bishop d7. He's trying not to make the stodgy moves like that. He's trying to keep Bobby's trying to keep fluidity, right, in his position, right? Who else used to speak about that? Bruce Lee, the Kung Fu master, used to say, oh, you've got to move your body like water. Yeah. Or how do you say? Water. He'd raise his voice, really high pitch. Anyway, but fluidity is important in chess when you're talking about the way your pieces are coordinated together. Bang, he says, I don't care. I've done all the right things, all the right things in chess. I've got space. I've got my pawn on d5. I'm going to take your knight, and now I've got a connected passed pawn. So after pawn takes bishop, you can see that this pawn here is a dynamo. It's so powerful, right? It's going to take forever for Bobby to do anything about that passed pawn. And so that is the challenge that Portisch put to Bobby Fischer. And what happened there? Oh yes, he took the knight, recaptured, then he plays pawn takes pawn. And now he said to Bobby, well, this is even more of a challenge for you because all my pieces are logically placed. I want to thank our friend for coming in and following the channel. I want to say a big shout out to Red Cow Thomas for subscribing with Prime. I want to say a big hello to all the people out there on Twitch. 247 people watching. Okay, so we're going to get back into this game and Bobby Fischer and the great Lajos Portisch. So pawn takes pawn is played. The whole idea is he's saying to Bobby Fischer, I want to occupy the square with my knight and I will crush you like chicken. No, he doesn't talk like that. It's the English grandmaster that copies the Russians when he talks like that. Okay, so he captured with the pawn, and this pawn has, though the pawns are doubled, they perform a function. These two pawns control this square, and this pawn controls that square. So white can't get in, so to speak. So white's got a problem. If white doesn't do anything, he will slowly be crushed. Bobby will maneuver a knight there, and put a knight in there, and the game will be all over, right? Okay. So what does white do to prevent that? Well, he goes on the attack. He says, I'm going to attack your c-pawn. What are you going to do about that? And so Bobby says, well, all right then. I'll move my bishop back to to f8, and I'll protect my pawn. At the same time, I can still do my, it makes it a bit harder to do his manoeuvrings and do this, isn't it, right? That's what he would like to do, but he can't quite do it. But he finds that that's still the best move to, oh, no, you can't take it, you blithering idiot. You take the pawn, he defended the pawn, and now queen to b3. Now white wants to play a move like, he just wants to move his queen on a good square. He's not really going to go there because it doesn't look good, does it? He'd like to play there. There's not many great squares there, but still, that's not the idea. He wants to put his queen somewhere else. Now the knight moves over here. Okay, so Bobby's got the knight going over there. I don't think Bobby would have been happy with this position. I don't think he would have been happy. It's anyway, because Bobby liked to really crush his opponents. Look at this move. Queen to e3. He's put his queen on a good square. He's moved his queen over to defend his king side. At the same time, attack a pawn. Now this is stopping white from playing, oh, that's what he's doing. He wants to play knight here, knight there, and knight there. That's his plan. Oh, Bobby Fischer, you're a genius. See, I was wondering because my plan was different. My plan was play knight here, knight there, and knight there, right? But Bobby wants to go knight here, knight there, and knight there. So that's Bobby's plan. So that's why he's gone there. It's got a dual purpose though. Prevents f4 and these pawns rolling forwards. So Bobby Fischer, genius, yes, 100%. Queen to a7's played. So this pawn was threatened and now it's protected. H4, he says, well, if you're going to stay over there on the queen side, all tied up, you beauty, what I'll do is I'll move over this side of the board. Now, when we look at positions, we usually try to identify the worst piece on the board and the best piece on the board, and how we can get exchanges and nullify our opponent's position. Now, what Portisch has said to himself is he's looked at all the pieces. He says, that knight's dangerous. It could go here, here, and here. It could do. Not straight away, but it might do. So I've got to be really cautious. So what am I going to do? Okay. He came up with a plan. He said, well, the castle's doing a good job protecting that pawn. The queen's doing a good job controlling that rank and holding that pawn. And this rook's not doing much good. But what else can he do? He doesn't want to exchange rooks because then he's left with target pawns. Very, very hard to win. So he wants to keep the rooks on. Now, white looks at the position and says, well, this bishop, if it goes here, well, simply pawn here and the bishop can't go anywhere. Is the bishop here good? No, it blocks the file. Is it here good? No. There's a pawn on in the middle. So where can it go? If you go bishop here, the knight can attack the bishop, right? Knight can come back and attack the bishop. So this is the worst piece for black. But it's also a good piece for black in that it prepares the f5 move in some variations. So white decides, I haven't got a great bishop. I'd like to swap my bishop for your bishop. And then you will have this really bad black bishop. So the knight goes back, he starts his tour. Remember his tour, he wants to play here and here. Okay. He's gone back there. Okay, king there. Now we can see the plan of Lajos Portisch. he had the plan of playing knight here to tie all these pieces up with that little pawn. And plan B is to extricate his bishop and try to control white squares in the game. Right? Now, he took the bishop. Now, he could have played, I don't know why he didn't, but he must have considered that knight here was not a great move and didn't give great options for winning, because it is Bobby Fischer. He took the bishop. He must have thought it was the best move. King takes. You can check it out with the chess engine. Knight to e6 is played. Finally, Bobby wants to get his knight on d4. Bobby thinks, once I got the knight on d4, then I can put my rook on the b file and put pressure and all the rest of it. And play queen to f7 and try to go f4 and get a kingside attack. And then, what does Lajos Portisch do? The super grandmaster from Hungary, the Hungarian Bobvinik. What does he do? He pushes the h pawn. When you think, oh, hold on, can't you take that off? Well, it's not good, because after king here, you can play rook here and attack it, can't you? Okay, I want to thank Fana Fujadit for following the channel. That's an unusual name. All right then. Yeah, what we're doing is we're following the part of the career, a very tiny part of the career of the great Lajos Portisch. We're doing a little tribute to him, and we have already played through his game against Zvetozar Gligorich. Right, Zvetozar Gligorich. And now we're playing through the game of Robert J. Fischer and Lajos Portisch. Okay. Okay, rook to h1 is played. Rook to a file to d8. Finally, that rook comes into play. Bobby's been waiting for that rook to come into play for some time. Now, when Bobby Fischer is most dangerous is in sort of complex, dangerous positions, right? You know, where chances for both sides and everything, right? And he was a super lightning chess player too, Bobby Fischer, winning the World Lightning Championship as well. Massive scores. King to g2 is played, and now the queen comes over, and you think, oh, well, go and grab that pawn. No, you can't take that pawn. There's a knight check there. Bobby saw that probably 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. There's a knight check there, wins the rook. So what does Portisch do? He says, well, I'm going to move my king to f1. Now I want to take that pawn off. Right, so what he's doing is he's creating counterplay against the black king. So the queen goes there, right? Rook hits the queen, and the queen slips back to g6. So it's almost like Bobby wanted him to bring his rook in. And now the queen goes back to e2. e2. Can't you see knight to d4 coming in here? He played bishop there. He doesn't want to play knight to d4 straight away. He wants to improve his position. b3, Portisch just secures this pawn structure, and once secured, he can move more pieces around. Rook to d7 is played. The plan being there's only one open file on the board, and Bobby Fischer's got it with this move here. So rook d1 is played, and he's saying to him, he said, well, all right, do your best. He takes the rook. Well, it must have been tempting to play knight to d4, but he chooses not to. You see the rook on h4 here, it sort of protects the e-pawn as well, doesn't it? And now rook hits queen. Well, queen to e2. He's defending the e pawn, over defending it. Bishop hits rook. So black has only got, he's got 4 pawns on that side of the board, but it's the only way he can move that rook. But he can't bluff Lajos Portisch, not the Hungarian Botvinnik. Knight takes knight, pawn takes knight, and now rook takes pawn. Now, to all intents and purposes, black's solved a lot of his problems. Bobby Fischer's solved a lot of his problems, and he's got the open file, and you would think that if white's not careful, he'll get run over. It nearly happens too. Look at this move, rook to d2. Typical Bobby Fischer move. But no, queen goes up there. He's not worried. He's not worried. He's playing queen there. Now, you think, oh, hold on, well, you can take a pawn off. No, you can't just take a pawn off. If you take a pawn off here, knight takes pawn. Look at this move. And then you can't take the knight because if rook takes pawn, wins the queen. Right? Okay. So you can't just go pinching pawns with the rook. So what does he do? What does Bobby do? He plays h6. He defends the g pawn. Now he's threatening to take the pawn. Right? And the rook comes back and defends it. Perfect timing by the Hungarian Botvinnik. Okay, so he moves his king up. Knight comes back into the action. Just timing is impeccable, isn't it? You would think that black looks like black is better in this position because white does look like he's in a bit of trouble. Rook to d3 is played. Attacks the knight. So he wants to drive the knight away. The knight goes back to d1. Gee, the queen's fulfilling a lot of important tasks on this g4 square, isn't it? Okay? Isn't it fulfilling a lot of tasks on that square? White's pieces are coordinated beautifully. If anything, black has to be cautious here because knight here and knight there is winning. Right? So this is not easy. The queen goes back, right? Now, what's the idea? What's the idea? Oh, well, you can't play knight here now, can you? Because rook takes knight wins a knight. Because the pin against the king. Right? So he moves his king and he says, I still want to play knight here and knight then win the game. I want to win the game. So what does he do? He moves his queen there. So now he's threatening a dirty, big discovered check. Look at the discovered check. And the queen's gone. Right? Okay. And he's also threatening the knight. So he's got 2 threats here. He's threatening knight checks and he's threatening rook takes knight. So how do you save all the threats? Well, I'll show you. You play queen there. Hold on a minute. What about the knight? Well, this is Lajos Portisch, Super Grandmaster. I think he knows what he's doing. Rook takes knight. Queen takes pawn check. Where do you go? Well, if you want to draw, you can go here. That's a draw. King here. And then just check, 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 right? He says, oh no, I'm going back there. I want to win. And rook takes pawn's played. Now we're threatening rook takes knight and queen takes knight. So the knight's got to go back. And now queen takes rook to g6. Exclamation mark move. Threatening queen takes pawn here. All the pawns are loose. Look. All the pawns. They're all loose. So g4 is played. And now it's in this position that white's probably threatening queen here, right? No, he's not. Not really. But that move there would threaten checkmate, right? Okay. A lot of players might resign. But it's all covered. Because look at the move that Lajos Portisch plays. Double exclamation mark. The Super Grandmaster, the Hungarian Botvinnik. 11 times he qualified in the Interzonals. 8 times in the candidates. 9 times champion of Hungary. Rook takes knight check against the great Bobby Fischer. Queen takes and a big check, right? And a draw is agreed. Look at this. A draw is agreed. Because after queen here, you can't play queen here. Because check here. Oh, so you've got to play queen there. Check here. And if you move here, he'll check you here, and then you've got to move your king, and then queen takes pawn check, and you lose your rook. So that's why it's a draw. Wasn't that very, very good timing and balance and counterbalance by the two super players of the era, Lajos Portisch and Robert J. Fischer? Okay? So it was a great draw. It was a great draw. Some people say, oh, I don't like draws. They can be boring. But not when they're hard-fought draws like this one was. Bobby Fischer probably thought, oh, you know, I'm a lot better than you, Lajos. I should really beat you. So he really pushed it. And it ended up to be a draw. The game ended up to be a draw. So it was a great game. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that presentation on the great Lajos Portisch. Well, it went for an hour. Started at 6 p.m. It's now 7:02 p.m. And I'm going to, take on challenges. So anybody would like to play me chess, come in and join me, right? Come in and join me on chess.com. And we could play some blitz chess or whatever you'd like to do. You can have a 10-minute chess game with me, or if you've got a really good game that you would like to show me, or you want analysed, or just or want us to look at the game and just talk about the game, well, you can make a suggestion. I'm open to all the suggestions. G'day, Fano Fugit. There you go. He says he liked my commentary. It was like an exciting bedtime story. Right, so for any of those people that came in late, yeah, I did mention a few things about Portisch. He was also a swimmer. He liked to go swimming. Well, lots of people go swimming. But do you know that he was he liked to sing opera, right? Operatic pieces, right? And he'd sing the classical pieces to Strauss and Beethoven, right? Yes, he loved his singing, right? And so he was mainly a positional player, and he didn't study. He didn't like to study openings which he wasn't going to use. So in all his tournaments and stuff, if there were openings that he wasn't going to use, he wouldn't even bother looking at those. Spend 8 hours a day looking at other openings and preparations, and that's how I think he got to where he was. In that high position of world chess. He had a selected group of openings that he stuck to and that he was exceptionally good at, and he was like a rock, and he just improved on those particular openings all the time, and Bobby Fischer was much the same. Remember, Bobby Fischer would only ever play e4 as white, really. He wasn't into all those queen-pawn positional games. So I suppose that's where people stepped in and filled a void, like the great Hungarian Botvinnik. Okay, I've been challenged to a game. What happened? Here it is. Looks like I've been challenged by the mighty chess master 65390. We've seen this guy around the blocks. It's a 3-minute game. He didn't play bishop takes pawn check. I thought there was a possibility of it. Anyway, we're going well. I win. I won. Yay! Take his knight. Now, if you count the minor pieces, at the moment, I've got an extra piece. And I've still got an extra piece. So I'm doing well. And I've got an extra piece. So I won a piece. That was good. I've got 7 pawns and he's got 7 pawns. He hasn't even got 1 pawn for his piece. Not 1 pawn. Okay, we'll develop a piece and attack his bishop. Okay. Now we're going to, this pawn is pinned. We'd like to protect this pawn. So one way to do that would be to play king here and then pawn here and protect that pawn. Now I can play pawn there and protect the pawn. He goes there. Right, well, I can play bishop here and attack the castle. That gives me a bit of a tempo. I can get a piece working with a tempo. Bishop here looks good. He can chase me away, but if he does, I'll only attack his bishop. So he goes there so we can chase the bishop away now. Now he's got to change bishops. There you go. And now I can get a tempo and get my castle working. Boom. And I can hit his castle. So all my pieces are active, right? Okay. Well, I can play knight here now and threaten the pawn. I just love to threaten things. And now I just slip my knight back here and protect my pawn. So I've got no weaknesses. Okay, so now I can play rook to d7. And I'm just going to pile up on the d pawn. He wants to play f4, so I'm just going to say, all right, if you want to do that, that's okay. I can play pawn here. I want to break up. I want to use my extra piece, my knight, to win the game. So I'm happy to exchange 1 castle. Get back on these, control these files. Just change castles if we can. Threaten his pawn. Take it off. Take that one off. Take them all off. White won. I got 1 bar up on the clock. Oh, I'm going to play 5-minute games. I'm playing 5-minute chess. I want to say, Fan Judy says, exciting bedtime story. I'm great. What other bedtime? Oh, what else? Oh, hold on. I've got another story about GrandMaster Lajos Portisch for you. This story comes from Broken Hill, right? From one John at Broken Hill. And John says in the 1970s, he thought it was, he was, you can look it up when he came over to Australia. He was sponsored by Grace Brothers, I think. Anyway, that was the store. And Lajos Portisch was doing a simultaneous exhibition. And John, the piss pot, is drunk from Broken Hill, was playing in the simultaneous against the great Lajos Portisch. And anyway, Lajos Portisch would move around all the boards and make a move. He came up to John's board and he's standing there for about 2 or 3 minutes, and everyone came over to John's board, you see, and to the man from Broken Hill, and they thought, oh, what's going on? There must be something special here. Is he beating the great GrandMaster Portisch? And with that, Portisch went, huh! And what had happened was the king and queen of John Elder from Broken Hill, they were on the wrong square, right? So Portisch was looking at the board and he's thinking there's something wrong with this position. And that's what it was. The king and queen, my friend had put the king and queen on the wrong squares when he set up the board. Yes, something like that. So it's just funny that everybody reacted, you know, but Portisch knew what he was doing. Castles. Okay, we'll get our bishop out.